Hello and welcome to another episode of the Brew Hoop Podcast. Panic is looming in Bucks Nation, fellas. That's what the theme of this episode has to be after a tough loss to the Knicks yesterday. But of course, we have to keep talking about the Bucks because that's what we do. That's what we love to do. And I'm Adam Paris, co-managing editor of BrewHoop.com, joined as per usual by my faithful compatriots, Kyle Carr, Riley Feldman. Fellas, how are you doing on this beautiful Sunday?
I'm doing all right. We had Friendsmas last night, had a hell of a cheese and meat board. So I'm still coming out of the food coma, but ready to talk about the impending doom and folding of the franchise.
And Liverpool just beat their city rival Everton on a last minute BS goal in which I was celebrating probably the loudest in months. So it's been a good day so far.
That's good. Well, I'm glad Liverpool wiped off the stink of the Knicks loss. Riley, that cheese plate looked delicious. I wanted to reach through my screen and eat it when I saw a picture of it.
Yeah, I might be willing to help out the readers and listeners and post a picture of it in the comments section of the post up on Brewhoop of this. So if you are interested in what a hell of a homemade cheese and meat board looks like, go to the comments section. You will find an image of it.
Well, I don't think there's any better way to kick this off than to start talking about the tough loss to the New York Knickerbockers last night. 136 to 134, the Bucks fall. Chris Middleton barely plays in the game, only plays 19 minutes, effectively benched by Bud. Giannis and Eric Bledsoe did their best to try and pull the Bucks through, but in the end, the Knicks' crazy hot shooting helped them emerge victorious. I'm just going to give you guys. So this was something I was curious about, and I knew. I mean, this game for me personally didn't bother me as much as some of the other losses. It seemed pretty clear about why we lost, which is the Knicks were shooting outrageously well. So I was curious how many games in basketball history has a team shot better than the Knicks did yesterday, where they shot at least 34 3-pointers. And it looks like only 7 games ever has a team shot a better 3-point percentage than the Knicks did yesterday on their 34 attempts. So if you're curious about why the Bucks might have lost, it's that the Knicks had some crazy historical shooting anomaly. Emmanuel Mudiay, a bricklayer, if there ever is one, was shooting the lights out. So that's kind of what I'm chalking that one up to. Kyle, what were some of your initial impressions of that loss?
Well, it was one of those things where the whole game, the Knicks would, get within, 2 or 3 points, and then the Bucks would go on a run and get back up 10. It just kept happening throughout the whole game. And then they got to the fourth quarter, and it's like, okay, the Bucks are up. I think it was like 17 at that point. I was like, that's better. That's more what we were expecting. And the Knicks just kept hitting tough three after tough three after tough layup after tough mid range, and it's just one of those where the Bucks just couldn't get a basket and they couldn't get a call and they couldn't. And not to say like it was Russ' fault at that point. It was just one of those where nothing went the Bucks' way, and it's I don't know. I'm not upset about this one compared to the Phoenix game or even the Charlotte game. It's just one of those where when the other team hits 20 or 34 from three, and a lot of those threes at the end were by guys that don't make shots like Noah Vonleh and Emmanuel Mudiay and, Doxson, whoever that is. Those are the games you're just not going to win. And that's just a clear sign. Like when that happens, you're just not going to win that game. And the fact that the Bucks only lost by, well, I don't even know, like 2 points, I guess that's acceptable. It's not acceptable if they lost, but considering the circumstances, it is what it is.
Doesn't it kind of strike you guys as odd the fact that it seems every team has their most historic shooting night of their entire franchise history against us? It feels like that's happened like on 5 or 6 separate occasions this year. And I don't know what to chalk that up to. Like the defensive system we've talked about before, like in theory, it works wonderfully for modern basketball, but it's just weird that teams go shoot lights out night after night against us. So that's kind of annoying.
Well, this was something I was actually going to bring up later in the podcast, but this is a perfect time to do it anyway. So I think an interesting discussion point is certainly what is the system allowing people to shoot these shots at such a high effectiveness? And I mean, yeah, granted, it's clearly designed to allow people to shoot mid rangers and give them slightly more leeway in terms of that regard. They even mentioned that on the broadcast the other day. They were talking about how the Bucks were how Katie George had mentioned that in the huddle she heard Bud talking about how they were giving up mid rangers and how he said, "Hey, I just want you guys to stick with it. Like it's okay. That's the kind of shot that we want to give. We don't want to be overhelping and that kind of stuff." So it's good to hear that message reinforced. And if you look at how opponents are shooting against the Bucks, if you look at this is per cleaning the glass, teams are shooting the best against the Bucks from the mid range in the league, 45%. NBA.com has them at 44%, which I believe was ranked around fourth. But I mean, if you look at I was looking at the last 2 seasons, and the best an opponent has ever shot against a team over a full season was against the Suns. It was like 42.6% last year. The year before was like 42% against a team. So I mean, realistically, you have to expect that number to come down, and the median was around 40%. So you have to imagine that over the course of a full season, that's not going to be sustainable for teams to continue shooting that well, especially from the mid range. And then obviously the other big bugaboo with Bud's defense is that it does give up a high percentage of threes, cleaning the glass. It gives up, the Bucks are ranked 29th in terms of percentage of shots that an opponent gets against them from 3-point land at 36%. But you know, like the ones that you really don't want to give up are corner threes, and the Bucks are ranked 11th in that regard. But meanwhile, teams are shooting 42.6% from the corner. So the Bucks aren't giving up that many shots from the corner, but teams are nailing them at the 20, the fourth best rank in the league. So teams are shooting really, really well against the Bucks, and from areas that obviously are going to hurt them. In contrast to that, though, the Bucks also have the best field goal percentage at the rim. So you might expect that to maybe, go back up and revert to the mean a little bit more. But I mean, up to this point, it feels like it's just sort of been teams are just hot shooting against the Bucks. And I don't know if that's a product of the system or if that's just something that might eventually come down as the season wears on.
This is the part where I throw in some herky-jerky, whatever theories that if you allow teams to shoot the mid-range and then they get hot and then all of a sudden they're shooting 60% from three, which I don't fully buy into, but maybe that's a conspiracy theory we can fan the flames of as the year goes on.
I don't know, Kyle. What? Yeah. I mean, see, this has been like my primary issue with some of my primary thing with some of the consternation that's certainly going around. And I mean, I get it. It's really frustrating to lose to teams, especially teams you view yourself as far superior to. But I mean, the process behind all this is really effective. I mean, I can't really quibble with it. If I told you guys that 22 games into the season, the Bucks would be ranked first in offensive rating, sixth in defensive rating, number one in net rating, somehow their defensive rebounding would be suddenly the best in the league. They have the best effective field goal percentage in the league. I mean, we would all be losing our mind.
I agree with that. Sorry, go for it, Kyle.
Well, more the how they're losing games, I guess. Like, if you really look at the games they've lost, Celtics, that was record-breaking three-point shooting that I don't sustainable ever again. Portland, CJ McCollum is hitting every mid-range shot. That was a bad game. Bucks just did not have the firepower to compete with Portland when they were shooting as well as they did. Clippers, last-second floater. Grizzlies, the Bucks. That was probably one game where the Bucks were like actually bad. And then otherwise, Suns was another game where the Bucks did not take the Suns seriously and lost that game. Hornets, I don't even know what that game was. It was just a weird game. And then last night, like all these games, besides maybe Portland, the Bucks probably could chalk that up to that was just a weird game and things just went wrong. And other than the Suns, there wasn't really a bad loss. Like Memphis isn't that bad of a team. Charlotte, that's a road game, and Charlotte probably is better than we're giving them credit for. So besides the Suns, it's not like the Bucks are losing to bad teams like Chicago and Cleveland. This is a good team, and I think we just have to realize that this is actually a good team, and we need to calm the fuck down. Sorry for my language.
We're gonna have to bleep that one out.
We'll bleep that one out. Don't worry. We want to make sure this is safe for the kids.
I would just kind of follow along with that. I think part of the frustration for a lot of people is, and this is kind of going over seasons now, is the fact that and this might be endemic of other teams. I don't really follow the teams as closely, but the fact that the Bucks continue to play down towards their competition. And this was a problem even in the Kid era, which, I mean, there was plenty of other issues to kind of get caught up on. But, the fact that you're kind of half bleeping it. Sorry, I'll self censor for that one. So I have to go back and do the projection. So you're half bleeping it against, you know, the Bulls, against the Knicks, against, you know, the Spurs, who aren't really the greatest team, et cetera, the Suns. You know, the list kind of goes on. And I think that's what's probably most annoying. And then once you have that kind of initial annoyance, if the team doesn't clean it up and win, then you kind of get worried and then you start picking things apart. So I think that's probably has a lot to do with the fact, or a lot of the consternation has a lot to do with the fact that they have slow starts pretty consistently, which is annoying in its own way.
Do you think? I mean, so do you think that some expectations though probably were set unfairly? Because I don't know if they've certainly lately. I think maybe they've been a little playing down to their competition, or that maybe they just haven't opponents have been shooting well. But I mean, earlier in the season they were blowing out Orlando by like 22. They destroyed Minnesota. They beat New York by 11. That granted that game was a little closer. They absolutely obliterated Sacramento. You know, so I mean, maybe we were expecting them to be winning all these games by 30 or whatever, and you know, now if they win a game by like 10, we're like, I don't know, was that good enough? They should be winning by 30. So I kind of feel like maybe expectations were set a little potentially too high for how they should be performing against these teams, and absolutely, you know, slaughtering them, especially at a time when offense seems to be, you know, free flowing in a way that it has in years.
Yeah, well, I think a lot. You go for it, Kyle. Go.
Nope, go Riley. Go.
Okay, I was going to say, just kind of following up. I think your point, Adam, about the expectations being set way too high too early is definitely poignant, and I think that's what's going on right now. And it's, I mean, if you think of the psychology of the fan base or being a fan, it makes sense, especially for Bucks fans, given the fact that we had this like pseudo abusive relationship under Kidd, and you know, everybody hated him. It was the worst ever. I mean, my God, can it end? And then you kind of go in, you're a little tentative, like this should be better now that we have Bud. And then you come out the first 7 games, you're just decimating team after team after team, and it makes sense that everybody would have heightened expectations. And now that teams are starting to kind of maybe figure out the Buck system, as there's more of a body of evidence to work with to kind of analyze. Kind of regression to the mean, even though the mean is much higher than it was even a year ago, is going to be a tough pill to swallow, especially with how, you know, positive everybody was and how good the feelings were the first 7 games into the year.
What were you going to add, Kyle?
I was just going to say, like, I think maybe the expectations did get a little bit too high because, you know, yeah, the Bucks were just crushing teams by 20, 30, 40 points consistently. And I mean, that was never going to be super sustainable. And this all with the, you know, strongest schedule. But we also have to take into account that the team has had a little bit of an injury bug. You know, John Henson being hurt, Dante DiVincenzo, Ersan, like those 3 guys being hurt, you're going further down the bench. And I mean, Sterling Brown has played really well in stepping up in those times, but Don Maker's been hit or miss. And when you have those kind of injuries, you know, it kind of throws the rhythm off. It kind of throws personnel off, and you have to change things. And I think teams are exploiting that a little bit more. So I think that's also something to consider. And the Bucks still have the second best record in the East and maybe overall in the league, if not third. So this team is still doing pretty well. I just think expectations was winning 65 plus games and running away with the Eastern Conference.
And if I could just kind of follow up, though, the one area where I could say is it's fair to have expectations that this team did still be doing quite well. I mean, you know, it's tough to be the top offense in the league and, you know, a top 6 defense in the league and not be routinely doing really well against opponents. So I think, you know, expectations being adjusting, kind of being fluid right now, regardless. You still have, you know, 3 really good top 3 players. You have a Brook Lopez, like the guys you brought in are doing really well. You have a top offense, a top defense, et cetera, et cetera. So I still think, you know, there should be higher expectations for the way the team is, you know, the team is falling to the higher expectations. And to a certain extent, having a higher expectations, you know, should be the case given the way the team has played so far.
Yeah. And I think it's fair to try and hold them accountable to that, which, so, I mean, it makes sense that we should try and talk about this. And if we're going through a period like this where we're like, oh, the Bucks should be racking up these wins, we should be, you know, getting all these notches on the bedpost so that we can be ready when it comes playoff time and we have all these wins banked. And if we're trying to fight with Toronto, if they happen to go through a bad spell and we can get home court advantage, that will certainly help us out in that regard. So I guess my main thing is it feels like the process so far is really, really solid and sound. And I think the wins will continue to come. Maybe this is just a period here where opponents are just shooting the lights out or they're just going through something. I think Kyle's point is important to remember that they did have to sort of rejigger a bit of the rotation on the fly here especially at center. And typically Bud would probably include Ursan in there and center if John Henson had gotten hurt, and now Ursan's out as well, so that forces him to go even further. And of course, we still don't get to see any Christian Wood, but it was nice to see him light it up in the G League. It looks like DJ Wilson had 19 points last night too, which
really, he didn't miss a shot. That's the most important part.
Wow. I saw some highlights from his first game, and I was trying feverishly to see if I could find stats for him. And I had to look around really far to even try and find him. So I was afraid that they had just like hid the stats and wanted to just hide that he didn't even play in that game. But
Friday news up for the win.
Glad to know that he's being put out there, and his performances are being highlighted.
Do we, do we want to talk about Chris at all real quick, since that's just a wrap up on the Knicks game? I don't know if we want to, before we talk about the larger things.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I don't really have much in the way of thoughts about it. I don't feel strongly that, I think it was probably the right move because Chris was not playing well. You could say like, oh, Bud hampered the team's ability to win down the stretch by taking Chris out, but Chris had a lot of not caring all that much in the terms of his body language. So I think it's fair expectations that if he's going to be, the number 2 guy, he doesn't have to be like, the lockdown defender. I think we've moved on from him being a 3-and-D guy a long time ago, but definitely doing a little bit of effort and not allowing offensive rebounds and wide open threes would be super great in the future.
Yeah, I have no issue with what Bud did because I think that's what you need to do. If you're not playing hard out there, then you shouldn't be playing. I mean, as much as we deride Kidd for saying energy and effort, that would have been one where had Kidd benched him, as he said, he wasn't showing enough energy and effort, we would have been rolling our eyes and being pissed off. But at the same time, like, it needed to be done. He didn't look like he was playing as hard as he could, especially rebounding the ball. Like, I think Eric Name had tweeted, like, Chris went for a rebound, didn't really box out his guy, didn't really try that hard. It kind of got batted out, passed it to an open guy, and Chris kind of just Jabari Parker-esque ran out to somewhat contest a shot. And, when you're doing stuff like that, you shouldn't be playing, even if it is, hurting the team. So I'm okay with Budenholzer doing this, in December against the Knicks. And if this was, April in a playoff series, then maybe I'd have a little bit more questions. But if you want to get your message across, this is the best time to do it.
Yeah, I totally agree. That play was absolutely so frustrating. And I mean, he barely started playing there in the fourth quarter before that happened. That loose ball got batted out. He barely seemed like he wanted to even grab it. Then the Knicks nail a 3 over him when he's just, casually making his way out there. It really seemed like, I don't know when the Bucks flew into New York, but it seems like maybe New York nightlife got him or something. I don't know. It feels like he seemed like he was the guy who really didn't care to be out there. And that was frustrating to see. And so I don't blame Bud for wanting to try and send a message in that way. And you're right, Riley. If he's going to be the number 2 guy, I mean, it's a hard effort and energy level to live up to with Giannis being the number 1 guy. But I mean, like, if Giannis is setting the tempo and Giannis is the leader, then Giannis should also be the guy who should be telling Chris. And I know Giannis seem like he's the most vocal with his teammates. He certainly is with refs, like he was yesterday at the end of the game. But I mean, he should be following in Giannis's lead if he's the guy who's supposed to be the second banana, at least at this point, to the team. And Eric Bledsoe looked like that guy yesterday.
Yeah, I think also part of it too, part of the frustration is in years past, you could kind of give Chris maybe a little bit of a pass on defense because in Kidd's system, a lot of the offense, it didn't run through him, but it would be like a lot more of a grind for him to like get his shots essentially. And like his shot selection was a lot crappier. Whereas now, a lot of sets that are run are like relatively simple. Like, okay, you're going to pop to the 3-point line and bing, bang, boom, good to go. So I think now that there's an adjustment where it's not Chris, take the ball and go create and expend all your energy on offense. It's fair for everybody to have higher goals for Chris on the defensive end. Again, him being a lockdown defender probably is going to happen given injury history and his age and et cetera, but put in a little bit of, effort, especially with like Eric Bledsoe, like you were just saying, right next to you, blowing dudes up constantly. So just a little bit more would be great, Chris.
Yeah, Bledsoe Bledsoe looks really engaged defensively, which is really nice to see. Here's just one last thought, and it kind of from the Knicks game, and it might be a little broader, is especially with Ursan out, we've seen like some of this Giannis at center stuff, and you could see it defensively. And I just saw him yesterday at one possession doing like the Brook Lopez thing where he's hanging back on a pick and roll. And it just struck me as so strange like I don't know why Giannis would ever be used in that way, because yes, certainly the defense is designed to help, mitigate some of Lopez's weaknesses and Henson's, and I don't know. You can do whatever you want with Maker. I mean, he'd probably be better hedging and doing that kind of stuff, but I just don't really trust him defensively at this point. But, I wonder if that's going to be a larger staple, if Bud's going to have at least some sort of different defensive package to try and utilize Giannis in a more effective way than having him sort of be that floater. Cause I don't really see if he's going to be able to like pick off balls or steal stuff if he's just in that, sort of dead zone there. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but I'd be interested to see if they try and change the defense at all. I know we haven't noticed it. We've said they haven't. I know we said it seems like Bud isn't going to change the defense, but just something to watch if Giannis plays center more often as the year goes on.
Amen.
All right. Okay. Well, now that we saw that, and we have thankfully saw a few plays from our savior Dante, we get a chance to revisit our favorite segment with some actual meat on the bones. It's time for Dante's Inferno. All right.
We'll have to figure out what exactly the timing coming out of the graphic is there, or the soundbite is.
Yeah. It's clearly I'm still trying to figure that out. But all right, Kyle, what did you have? You seem the most hype about this Dante return, at least in the outline here. What'd you have for Dante's Inferno this week?
Can we just acknowledge the fact that Dante is back, and the defensive highlight that he had for the 9-minute stretch against the Chicago Bulls, I believe. He didn't score, which is totally fine, but he created 3 steals. He was a key part of the Bucks going on a run. Like, Dante is 100% back. I don't care about the 3-point shot right now, because just look at him on the defense. And this is what the Bucks were missing from their bench unit. Pat Connaughton has been filling the role great, but Dante, man, is just fantastic right now. And I'm glad he's healthy and he's hitting threes against the Hornets. And, that extra pass that he put for Brogdon for the 3-pointer against the Knicks yesterday, it was a work of art. So I am all for Dante being back, and this segment is now better because of it.
Do you have that next day delivery on the Dante jersey coming in, or what are your thoughts on that?
Wait until after Christmas, because if I get one for Christmas, great. If not, then I'll buy one.
Okay.
Which jersey would you get?
Ooh, probably
City
green.
Edition.
Not the City Edition. I already lost that bet. I already threw that wager on Twitter, and that didn't end well. So I'm going to go with probably the green.
All right, Riley, what do you have?
I don't have too much. Like Kyle was just saying, Dante's numbers haven't been crazy, but one, he's a welcome re-addition just to have more options on the bench, because like we were saying, it was kind of Pat Connaughton, and then if we needed any more minutes, it's okay, let's see what Sterling can do. And to Sterling's credit, he's done pretty well, at least the past 2 games, so that's heartening. But it's crazy how much of a change in opinion I've had of Dante, and it's still not like I think Dante's a key component like of championship winning team in the future for the Bucks, but like we were saying, multiple episodes now, when he was first selected, I was like, oh my God, not this guy. Like, really? The guy who's named the Big Ragu? I mean, we can all go back and the evidence is there, but to kind of turn around, and he's still got some stuff to work on with his shot, his 3-point shot, but it is impressive how many small things he's able to do. And even if he's not impacting the game as a scorer, which given the way the team is set up now in his role, he doesn't need to be, he's able to step in, provide a lot of energy, and kind of run through screens and et cetera, and break things up on the defensive end, and then kind of facilitate the offense without having to do a lot himself. Like, I'm sure, I haven't checked his usage rate, but I'm sure it's probably in the single digits. So it's just impressive. I'm glad he's back. It'll be interesting seeing how we balance now Pat's minutes versus him minutes, because Pat been playing pretty well as well in his absence. So we'll kind of see how that works out, but I'm happy to have him back.
Yeah, so Dante DiVincenzo's, just to follow up on that, usage rate is 15.1%. So just a smidge above Connaughton's at 14.8. Tony Snell, of course, bringing in the rear at 14.1. Delly's at 14%. So actually surprised by that, even in his spot minutes so far. But either way, it's really nice to have Dante back. I'll echo Riley's continuing sentiments that I continue to eat crow on the Dante pick and my initial take on it. And if you actually look at his on-off numbers, I mean, they're really good. Granted, it's really small sample size, 290 minutes, but with him on the court, the Bucks have a plus 13.8 net rating, and with him off the court, Bucks also have a plus 8.8. But to even have while you're on the court have a plus 5 net rating with the team is really solid. And when he's on the court, the Bucks have a really strong defensive rating. So I mean, I think that speaks volumes about some of his defensive flashes that he's shown thus far. For me, he was hitting some deep threes in Charlotte, which was really heartening to see because his three ball hasn't been falling, and I'm wary of doing if you look at his release, it looks really solid, because I felt like I was doing that with Rashad Vaughn for years, and that didn't work out.
We are not shot doctors, so please don't come to us to fix your jump shot.
Yeah, no, certainly don't. But his release looks good, and but if you
there's no hitch in that jumper. There's no hitch there.
But let's see what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with yesterday. I forget who was running around a screen, but Dante ran into the elbow, and I think it was probably Giannis, and Dante threw up his elbows. You know how I'm not trying to slander girls at all, but they would usually set picks, on the court by holding their arms in front of their chest. Yeah. Okay. Sure. So Dante basically did that and was trying to ram into Mitchell Robinson, and then just threw his arms out like a safety trying to smack a wide receiver who just caught a ball and blow him up. So I appreciated that. I don't think it led to anything, but I like that Dante was doing it. I like that he was willing to put his body out there and try and blow up big boy Mitchell Robinson. So that's my take on Dante for the week. All right. It's good to have him back. It's good to have actual plays to talk about and not be talking sadly about him missing games. Agreed. All right. Okay. Let's move on to the next segment, which is I've just labeled assorted questions, because I just had a few different questions I wanted to lob out at you guys now that we've talked a little more nitty gritty. So this is the first one I was kind of thinking about, and I've just been listening, and we've been seeing a lot of quarter season awards and that kind of stuff from a bunch of different outlets, and almost unanimously it seems like Giannis is being selected as MVP in a lot of areas, but a lot of some of the early season narrative, and I think he's pushed some of this aside, especially as if you just look at the Bucks schedule and the basic box score, he's basically led the Bucks in points, rebounds, and assists for each of the last 8 games, sans 2 where Bledsoe happened to lead in assists. But it felt like some of the early season narrative was a lot more about hand-wringing over, does Giannis know his role? He's not really quite fitting in. Sylvan had that great article on Brew Hoop about just that very fact and idea. So, Riley, what do you make of a little bit of the dissonance between the national media parachuting in and sort of being, effusive in their praise, but some Bucks people having to sort of be more minute in their criticism of him?
I think it's probably, we can chalk it up almost exclusively to the fact that we're so hyper-focused on this team versus others who, like you said, they parachute in, and I'm not sure how many could even point out where Milwaukee is on a map, dude. No, but I'd say part of what the issue, at least locally, with Giannis, and let's be honest, it's not even an issue. The guy is amazing. There's no ill will between ourselves or any fans and Giannis, because without him, we're nothing. So, but I would say what the main issue early on was the fact that the team, and we had already discussed this early on the podcast, but the fact that the team had such an awesome start, and Giannis, still even had an awesome start, but there was night after night, I was well, that's not Giannis's best game. That's not Giannis's best game. So there was kind of the hand wringing, and the fact that, oh, wow, okay, so Chris Middleton, he's completely changed the way that he approaches the offensive game. His shot selection is way better. Oh, the defense isn't horror awful. Wow, look at how effective it is, et cetera, et cetera. So the fact that there were all these other things that it's okay, we've reached the mountaintop. The team is finally fixed, and we're going to win a finals. And then it was okay, well, Giannis is struggling a little bit. So I think that was kind of had a lot to do with the early hand wringing. And now that, there are other problems, like whether or not Malcolm needs to get launched into the sun, that are taking up everybody's attention span, and that Giannis is doing Giannis even more so, I think a lot of the criticism locally is gone. And now that the team is winning, and it's kind of the fact that national media is starting to pay attention and give him his due, is probably a good benchmark for how well the team is doing and how it's impacting the wider conversation. So I think a lot of it just had to do with everything else looks so awesome, that the fact that Giannis had a slow start to the year kind of got everybody a little sweating.
Yeah, Kyle, what do you think?
Kind of the same thing as Riley. I guess the other thing I would mention, kind of like what he said earlier, is team people aren't like watching the Bucks closely. So when Giannis posts a 26 point, 13 rebound, 4 assist kind of game, they're just seeing the box score and they're like, oh, this is MVP type numbers. Like this looks really good. But then in the fine print, maybe you see he took 22 field goal attempts, or he missed 8 free throws, or he had 5 turnovers. And I think a lot of people are just like looking at his box score and looking at the highlights and they're like, yeah, that's an MVP. While for us, we're kind of looking and we're like, we know Giannis can play better. I mean, at this point, Giannis scoring 30 points, getting 20 rebounds and 8 assists. And that's like, okay, yeah, that's just a normal Giannis night. So I think for us, we know what a peak Giannis performance is. So we're just kind of like used to it. And it's more of a subdued kind of reaction while everyone else is kind of looking at like, this is something that we haven't seen since Shaq, or this is young LeBron-esque. And I think that's really the big point. I still think Giannis should be the MVP, but I can see why we here in Bucks Twitter are kind of, and Bucks Nation in general, are kind of like downplaying it because we're just used to it, while everyone else is kind of seeing this and they're thinking this is like a new revelation.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I just wanted to, I was just thinking about that. So I appreciate both your responses to that. I feel pretty much the same way, especially as, I mean, it's nice to see Giannis get that publication. It feels like the other big guy really has just been Brick Lopez, who's taken a lot of the national spotlight, especially for his Splash Mountain nickname. And Mike Prada had a really good article about how he's helping turbocharge this Bucks offense. So it's cool just to see Giannis get all these accolades, especially after sort of circling that discussion for years. So nice to see.
If you guys thought the hand wringing over his 3-point shot was bad before, just wait till the national media gets a hand of it. It's going to be the main topic for years to come. So prepare yourselves for that.
Oh yeah, I know. They were mentioning on Duck Down the other day, just like how historically bad he is right now at this point. But it's fine. I'm glad he's still shooting them. So keep it up, Giannis. You can keep shooting. All right. Next question I had. I was thinking about this because I've been trying to think about when we think about podcast topics and stuff that we want to talk about, and it's a lot easier when we're diving so deep on a team to find stuff like that. And I think about how the Bucks are off to an amazing start. One of the best starts that we can imagine in a long time. They're like really, really high in terms of both offensive and defensive rating. And I think about how they're talked about on national podcasts, and they certainly get some publication, but it feels like most of it is the discussion is circling around Giannis. And it kind of feels like this team is a little boring to talk about just because it seems to make so much sense. I mean, they're doing really well, besides like some of the recent hiccups. And it just kind of feels like they are just filing into the formula that we expect for a team that's going to win now, like a modern NBA team. They have Giannis, and he happens to be dominating in the paint, and that's sort of the one thing that people highlight that's really interesting about this team. But the other thing is that, I mean, we're shooting tons of threes. It's like, well, yeah, that's what you're supposed to have been doing for years. You're supposed to rebound well, and your defense, which did get a little publication early in the year, but now just kind of makes sense as well. It's like, yeah, they give up mid-rangers. That's what the math tells them that they should do. And really the thing that, defies some of those typical mathematical expectations that we would think is Giannis is really dominating in the paint at a historic rate. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you guys think this team is like kind of bland to talk about in any way? Is it just a product of me being far too feeling like cemented, comforted by the fact that we're finally doing modern basketball? What do you guys think?
Well, Adam, since you're not really on Twitter that much, I'd like to let you know that there was a fight over which sideline reporter is better between Katie George and Kelly. Oh. So no, this team is not boring. It's just that apparently we got to fight about something. So it's going to be sideline reporters, and both of them did a great job, and Katie's doing a great job. But
settle the debate, Kyle. Settle the debate.
They're fine. It's a sideline report. Like, they're both good at what they do. Like, I have no preference. It's dumb that this was even a topic that was being argued about. But no, this team is not boring to talk about. It's just that now the things that everyone has to fight about are minuscule and more irrelevant to the actual team, and it has to stretch out to the broadcast booth and sideline.
I would actually argue that the fact that there was a debate over which sideline reporter was the best is indicative of a team that can be a little bit boring to talk about. But that can be for analysis later on. No, I think on one hand, it is. I mean, I don't know. Again, we watch every single game, so for us, it's not super duper boring. But it's just what's the narrative to really latch onto? We're way too early in the season to be like, oh well, here's how we would match up against XYZ opponent in the playoffs, which can fuel the second half of the year. It's like too early to really talk about what's the all-star buzz. And then in the other teams who are like atop the East, whether it be the Raptors, Sixers, or Boston. They've all got like storylines going in, whether it be Kawhi or the fact that the Celtics were supposed to win 70 games and definitely doesn't look like they're going to do that, or the process, et cetera, et cetera. So I think nationally it can be a little boring to talk about because there's not like a ton of drama. I guess there's a little bit of worry about what's going on with the cap next off season. So maybe you can kind of talk about that a little bit. But the fact that they're playing basketball in such a way it follows along modern precepts of what basketball is supposed to be. There's nothing like, oh, here's this unique thing that they're doing. They're doing everything that general wisdom would kind of dictate that you do. And then once you get past that, then it's like, okay, well, Giannis is doing crazy stuff, but he's been doing crazy stuff for so long. And it's not like, wow, look at this guy coming out of nowhere. So I think it is a little bit boring, but I think that's a combination of they're playing a system where you don't have to get totally stressed out about how adequate it is. And then also we're still in, I think just past a quarter of the season so far. So right now it's boring. I don't imagine that to last once we get to like the halfway point and the shaking out of the postseason kind of works out and we get towards the trade deadline. So we're just kind of in the weird early season desert of content.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it'll be nice when we have a little more, I think halfway through the season, it'll be really interesting to see how this mathematical formula that they've decided both defensively and offensively is working in their favor, because we'll have a decent amount of a sample size by then to really figure out if this is something that we think will absolutely work. It seems to be I mean, it's obviously so far it's working like gangbusters. And I think, like you said, Riley, I mean, from a high level standpoint, I mean, a lot of the issues that we had with this team, which were foundational issues with how Jason Kidd ran a basketball team, we can't really touch on those anymore. And that's obviously there's a lot of meat on those bones. So instead we have to go to, the thighs and no, the thighs are gone. Sorry. We have to go to like nibble down to wherever the tiny bits of meat are left on these bones and that kind of stuff. And so that's where we get to the sideline reporter discussion, or talking about if Malcolm Brogdon, for example, how he's performing, even though he's technically putting together a career year. And I know you two had a sparring match online on brewhoop.com. So, I want to let you guys touch back on that particular discussion, especially how Brogdon's responded to clearly what he interpreted as you guys calling him out.
Kyle is the most slanderous person of all time. Malcolm, I've always been your biggest fan, and if you want to hire me as your agent, I won't be able to do much for you, but hell, I can put it together a really half-hearted defense of you if you want.
I'm not sorry for anything I said because it was all correct, and now Brogdon has decided instead of trying to take the ball and dribble it and drive it to the hole every time, maybe he should just be a spot-up shooter. And look at that. He's had his 2 best games of the season. I'm not sorry. If anything, Brogdon should give me, some props for lighting the fire in him, if anything.
I'm waiting for him to like get into like a post-game interview like, Kyle Carr, I know where you're at, bro. Like, he looks right in the camera like,
I'm waiting for him to subtweet me in an interview like he does with Kidd.
Yes, that would be awesome. No, I think you're right that the fact that there is this raging debate about whether or not Malcolm is the most worthless player of all time or somebody who's like a key player. I mean, it's just totally typical of, local fan base debate about any sort of random player that there's total extremes on both ends. But I think I don't know, these past 2 games haven't really changed the opinion all that much. I think it's, a positive that it seems like he's shown flexibility, especially like in the Bulls game, to show flexibility to defer and, spot up shooter, defer to Giannis when it's possible, take your shots when you get them. Obviously, he's not going to shoot whatever. I think he shot 10 for 11 from the past 2 games. He's not going to be making that many threes from here on out. But I think it's just difficult because, again, we've seen all these other guys buy into the system, and Malcolm is kind of playing as Malcolm has played for the past 2 years, which I wouldn't describe it as selfish, but it's definitely a different style of play than like, okay, you're going to sit over here and shoot threes, and that's going to be what you do here. That's what we do on offense. So I understand why there's dissonance about it, but I'm not sure if it's all completely warranted. It's obviously heightened also because he might get paid in the offseason, and who knows what that means for the team's future championship contentions. But anyways, I get why there's a debate, but I don't think it needs to be that serious of a debate.
And he has played well. I'll give him credit for that. So I'm glad he has stepped up. Also, I think it's just going to be between Brogdon and Middleton on who Bucks fans will be more annoyed with throughout the season.
Isn't that crazy? Isn't this? This is mind-boggling to me, though, considering the narrative surrounding Eric Bledsoe coming into the year. I remember when we did our top 5 people, and I put Bledsoe at 3 or something, and neither of you guys had him in top 5.
It's I had Sterling Brown over him, so I'm going to take the L on that one.
Hey, I had Brook Lopez ahead, and that's paid off.
Yes, no. Look, no slander on your list. It's just not. It's just kind of crazy to me that, and I think you guys are well representative of some of the perception coming into the year, though. I think it's crazy to me how quickly he seems to have turned around some of his perception among the fan base.
No, I agree. I'm not sure how much of it to chalk up to contract year Eric Bledsoe.
Right.
I mean, that playoff series against Terry Rozier, obviously you don't want to continue to harp on it, but that was tough. So I can understand why that might have depressed people's values. And then, he's a little bit older, et cetera, et cetera. But you're right that, I mean, I think it's probably arguable that he's the second most valuable Buck of the year, depending on what you think is the most important aspect of playing basketball.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the Brew Hoop in Mitchell Moore's, of course, shout out Mitchell for his co-managing editor title alongside at Brew Hoop. If you look at his awesome first quarter season summary article, Eric Bledsoe is rated as the Bucks, most valuable non-Giannis player, by a decent margin, 47% of the vote, as opposed to 33% for Chris Middleton. I mean, it's just been crazy to me, and I think a lot of that, for me, a lot of his value comes on the defensive end of the floor, where he really seems to be pulling his weight. And I think you're right, Riley, to call it out as a spade, and it is a contract year. So whether he'd be able to continue that going forward is an open question. But circling back to Malcolm Brogdon, I think obviously both of your discussion, you guys both had valid points. But I think that the thing that's interesting to me is if you look at basically, he's had really good counting stats and all that kind of stuff. And honestly, I mean, the Bucks are playing well with him on the court. If you look at cleaning the glass, they have a plus 4.2 point differential. That translates out to a expected win count of 52 if a team was playing with that sort of differential all season long. And then if you look at his on-off differential, though, he's at negative 14.9 points per possession. So he's good, and the Bucks are good with him on the court, but with him off the court, the Bucks are even better. So I think that's a good place to start, because I think it's important for us to realize that, yes, Malcolm Brogdon has a lot of value. He shoots really well. Maybe he does have to rejigger his role or rejigger his conception of what he should be within this offense. But if that's the case, could we just plug in someone who is, doesn't maybe like to dribble as much or doesn't need the ball as much as Malcolm Brogdon to maximize his value? And I think that's a really important point and an interesting discussion and question that we should be thinking about as the season goes on and as we start to think about which of those guys maybe the Bucks will be bringing back.
Yeah, I think it's what's his usage rate? I think I have it up. His usage rate so far in the season, like 18.7, which isn't super duper high. That's like on the upper third of the players on the team. It's weird because he was such a darling in the dark kid years that, now that everything else is kind of functioning, he's kind of the odd man out. And I think part of this too is like finding the role for Malcolm. And that was never easy, even under Kidd. That's why Tony Snell got so much run in the starting lineup, is the fact that, Malcolm isn't really built. He could do it, I'm sure, if he put his mind to it, but his natural game isn't built towards like, okay, I'm going to have like a single digit usage rate and I'm going to be a part of the starting lineup and, try to play passable defense and not harm anything. So just kind of be there on offense. And so that like the numbers, the on off and the net rating and everything you just said there, that kind of lends itself towards it. So it's just difficult finding a place for Malcolm, because it's like, okay, if you put him on the bench, I mean, is he, best there? Is he best as like just another, potential go-to offensive guy? So I think that's the dissonance that both Bud and then everybody else in the fan base kind of has to reconcile themselves with, is what's his ideal role. And I think that's totally in question. I'm not sure if, we're going to see Tony Snell or Pat Connaughton get into the starting lineup and try that experiment again or what. But there's a lot of question marks around it.
Yeah. Yep. So we'll obviously keep an eye on that. And, if he continues to succeed, we'll give all credit to Kyle.
Thank you.
Obviously. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, guys, let's wrap it up with our typical look ahead to the next slot of, I pegged it out as about 6 games we'll probably see before we record again. And let's first circle back to what the Bucks record was for the last crop of 6 games. Kyle estimated they'd go 5-1. Riley and I both had them at 4-2. Instead, they went 3-3. So not as great as we thought. I wish I had been able to carry over some of my early season pessimism. But unfortunately, I didn't. I got excited. So let's first go over the games that we have here coming up, and then we'll all make our predictions here. So they face the Pistons on Wednesday night, December 5th, 7 o'clock Central. Same with Golden State Warriors. That should be a good matchup. And Friday, December 7th at 8:30. Then they travel up to Toronto. Hopefully, Kawhi will actually be playing that game, because I would really like to see that, as well as Giannis. That'd be nice if Giannis also played as well. It's on Sunday, December 9th. That's at 5 p.m. Then they travel back home for Cleveland on Monday, December 10th. That one starts at 7. Then they have 2 road games at the Pacers and at Cleveland, first of which against the Pacers is Wednesday, December 12th at 6. And then at Cleveland is Friday, December 14th at 6:30 p.m. So, Kyle, let's kick it over to you first. What do you think they're going to go in those games?
I think I'm going to try and temper the expectations a little bit. I'll say 4-2. I think they're going to have a stumble in Toronto. I think just on the road. I don't know. I just don't feel great about it. I still think they're going to beat the Warriors, and then they're really going. I think the Pistons game is going to be a little bit more of a trap than we expect. So I'm going to go 4-2 with losses to Toronto and Detroit, but beat Golden State and Cleveland and Indiana without Oladipo.
Kind of looking through here. I think I'm going to go for 3-3. And I really hope those first 3 losses don't come on the next 3 games, because otherwise, this team is going to literally self-combust. It will not be good. I think the Pistons game is interesting because they have like a totally, not antiquated, I wouldn't say, but they have like a weird way that they go about the game with like Andre Drummond and Reggie Jackson and Blake Griffin. Like Blake Griffin's having a crazy year, but how do you counter having that much like interior play, et cetera, et cetera. So that'll be kind of an interesting test to see how the defense reacts to that. Golden State, I think either Steph will be, I think he's either coming back the game before or that game is he's slated to return. So it'll be a different Golden State team than we saw earlier. So that'll be maybe a loss as well. And then Toronto, no idea what to make of that. That'll be a how would you describe it? A top tier game, a marquee game of sorts. And then Cleveland, Pacers, you hope that you knock them out, especially with Oladipo out. So I'm going to guess 3-3. It'd be awesome if they do better, but wouldn't shock me if the Pistons game's a trap, like Kyle said, and then the other 2 are just difficult. They might out-talent us a little bit.
Yeah, the Milwaukee-Toronto game feels like an NBA TV special.
Oh, God, no, please.
It's going to be. That's the worst part.
I like thinking that if that's the Eastern Conference Finals, they're just gonna push it over to NBA TV, even though it's supposed to be on like TNT or ABC or whatever, whichever one has that.
They're not even going to broadcast it. It's going to be like a preseason game in Iowa. They're like, we don't even have broadcasting ability for this one. Sorry.
It'll be available in Canada and Canada only.
Yes, TSN. Everybody find your TSN station, please.
All right. Well, I'm going to mirror you again, Riley. I'm guessing 3-3. I'm not feeling great about this Warriors game. I feel like they might have a little vengeance in their veins, and especially with Kevin Durant playing as crazy as he is and balling out. And granted, he may have to be adjusting to Stephen Curry coming back, but I feel like they might be looking for a little vengeance there. The Raptors, I don't know. That place playing up there is just a house of horrors for Milwaukee, so I'm worried about that being a loss. And then the other one, um, I don't know. I think we'll be able to take care of Cleveland, and then I think the Pacers might be a little frisky. I can kind of see maybe Sabonis, coming in and doing a little work against the Bucks backup centers, maybe taking Brook Lopez to task. Yeah, I don't know. I could maybe see us dropping one at the field house down there. So I'm seeing 3-3. I that's okay, and that's I'm not going to be horribly disappointed by that, especially when we're facing during that stretch we're facing two of the best teams in the NBA. So we'll see where the Bucks come out on the other end. But for now, I'd like to ask both of you, because it's December and I'm someone who enjoys the holiday season, what's your go-to holiday movie? Riley, you first.
Well, okay. So we're what I would term a modern family, and by that I mean totally lame. And generally, my family watches Elf featuring Will Ferrell. So everybody can hit me in the comments on that one.
Why is that lame?
Well, I don't know.
I feel like that's a cliche answer.
What do you mean it's a cliche? The issue is I'll go to events.
Yeah,
it's true. I'll go to events, and the issue is like it's not cliche enough. It's not Rudolph or A Christmas Story, neither of which I've seen from start to finish. And if I pass from this earth not having seen either of those, I'll be okay.
You've never seen Rudolph?
Well, I've seen parts of it. Like, I know they have like the marathons. I've only seen probably total like 25 minutes of it. Claymation ain't for me. So sorry.
What?
Maybe that'll be my assignment for the next.
Yeah, Riley Scrooge Feldman. Boo! Oh my god!
Watch out! Right. Watch out, everyone.
Okay.
Great advice. Watch that cult classic Elf.
Yep. Well, Kyle's is the cranberry sauce story, so whatever. I'm just kidding.
I have a more reasonable answer this time. A dark horse that I had was Jingle All the Way with Arnold Schwarzenegger. That was a great one. But I'm gonna go with The Grinch, either the cartoon one or the Jim Carrey one. Probably the Jim Carrey one, though.
I haven't seen the new cartoon Grinch.
No, like the old cartoon one.
Oh, the old one. Okay.
Yeah, the old
1930s. One. They just figured out how to do color animation like that one.
Yeah.
I can get behind that. You know what one? I'm even more cliche than Riley, so I'm sorry for giving you some crap. My family always watches It's a Wonderful Life on Christmas Eve, so I'll watch that. But my main go-to holiday one is the Santa Claus with Tim Allen.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Really? That's a good one? Did you really just say that?
It's a great one. It's an amazing film. It's actually funny, kind of. It's wonderful. And Tim Allen, it's a perfect holiday vehicle for him. The scene where they go into Denny's is one of my favorites.
Except that the kid is really annoying.
The kid is annoying. I mean, but it's like, most kids in holiday movies are annoying. So I like the Santa Claus. Just the first one kind of went off the rails for 2 and 3. And I think might have been a 4th one.
I was going to say, I don't want to be like, one of the countless podcasts that also doubles as a movie discussion podcast. But the fact that it somehow got to like Santa Claus 63 it's a testament to how shallow Hollywood is. And I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yep.
Perfect.
Kyle and I agreed on something. That's a good way to close it. There we go.
Woohoo. Wow. Cheers to everyone. Thanks, guys. All right. Well, we'll be back again in about 2 weeks, talk some more. Hopefully the Bucks will be on a winning streak again. We'll just be happy and cheery heading into and even the thick of the holiday season then. But in the meantime, you can make sure to follow at BrewHoop on Twitter for everything that we're doing as a collective group. Great articles going up on brewhoop.com as always. And make sure to subscribe to us on iTunes. You can leave us a review there if you like. That always makes our hearts full of holiday cheer. And we'll be back with you again in about 2 weeks. Thanks again for listening.